Hey guys, I'm Caesar, and I chose to do this week's persuasive speech on whether or not schools should require their students to wear uniforms. Persuasive speeches are types of speeches which have an overall goal of convincing their audience to side with the speaker, or at least think about siding with the speaker. I chose to write my persuasive speech on whether or not schools should require their students to wear uniforms. I think that schools should require their students to wear uniforms. I think that uniforms would help with bullying and other problems that students might face. I think that uniforms would also help with funding between the students' families and the schools. I believe that all schools should enforce their students to wear dress code. I think a lot of the bullying begins with dress codes. I, for one, have not been a victim of bullying or been the bully, but I've for sure seen a lot of it. In middle school, all the time, people would make fun of each other over brands, what they're wearing, if someone's wearing something weird. I mean, even if you paid $100 for these jeans, but they've got skulls all over them, someone's gonna laugh at you because there's skulls all over them. But you just went out and spent a bunch of money. With uniforms, you're just wearing what everyone else is wearing, and that's it. A kid might be wearing something different compared to another kid, which causes them to begin to talk about it. Then it'll lead to them forming different opinions about each other, and next thing you know, they're making fun of each other. Bullying related suicides are the third leading cause amongst deaths in young people, resulting in over 4,400 deaths every year. These numbers are increasing as time continues, and it's breathtaking to know these are the real numbers behind some of these things. Funding is another big part of why I believe that school uniforms would be a positive impact on the school systems and the children that attend them. The money would be good for families, as we all know name brand clothes can get very expensive. I mean, it'll even be hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars you can spend on name brand clothes. And sometimes it's just to wear what the celebrity's wearing or wear what the rapper's talking about, if it's a Gucci belt or something. This would allow families to save money while also preventing their children from having potential problems at school, especially with all of the young kids who are trying to outdo each other with fancy brands these days, all to spill some ketchup from their meal at lunch on their clothes. Another way the funding would help is with the school system's budget. Most of the schools that require these uniforms also sell the uniforms. This would be great because the money goes back into the school, and the school can then use it towards fundraisers or after school programs, things where the school system's budget is short, but they now have this extra money coming in, a source of income to provide for the school. School uniforms also help in many ways that aren't noticeable right away, but over time begin to make an impact. Some of the things it makes an impact on are the students' grades, because the children are not so much worried about each other, but they're actually worried about what they're supposed to be learning that day. Wearing school uniforms also helps enhance school pride, and I think begins to make kids build unity within the school. A 2007 study from Oxford Brookes University in the United Kingdom found that uniforms often directly contributed to a feeling of school pride. I think that students with more pride would also make the atmosphere a lot more pleasing and free. I also think that it would make the sports team members have a little more energy and even pride in their school. I think that this would help them win games, tournaments, which would in return have them get trophies. I mean, it would just make the entire school a better place. Also, uniforms can have an impact on the environment that surrounds them and the school. In Long Beach, California, after 2 years of a district-wide mandatory uniform policy, reports on assault and battery in the school district dropped 34%. This isn't because kids with uniforms don't do bad things, but it's because kids with uniforms aren't worried about that kind of stuff. And some of the articles I read, there were, gangs take advantage of schools that don't have uniform, and they wear certain bandanas or pieces of clothing that they can be outspoken through the clothing without other people knowing about what they're into, and it's not good for schools. That's not what school's about. School's a place where we go to learn. So with that being said, here's some other percents that were pretty crazy. Assault with a deadly weapon dropped by 50%. Fighting incidents went down 51%. Sex offenses were cut by 74%, and robbery even dropped 65%. Besides all of the reasons I mentioned on why I chose uniforms as a mandatory thing within schools, I also believe that after hearing this speech, a lot of people will. The facts are shocking but certainly true, which I think makes it very clear as to what should be done about whether or not schools will require uniforms. It doesn't help the school or just the student, but both, and makes life a little bit easier all around. After all, Safety and education are the two most important things about school, and uniforms have an impact on both. I think that uniforms are great. They help not only the school, but the students as well. And then the school will have this extra money, which they can use towards, like I said, the fundraisers and all of the after school curricular activities that schools sometimes don't have a budget for. I mean, I remember going to schools where they would cut a class or something or a sport because not enough people signed up and they don't have the equipment. But if the entire school had their students shopping at that school to get those uniforms, I'm certain that there would be a lot bigger of a budget for these schools. Nonetheless, to say it would also help improve the surrounding district and the crimes in the area. So those are some of the reasons why I think that schools should require uniforms within the students.